A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, it might be one thing to consider how Christian ministry works here in Australia, but in nations around the world, Christian ministry in the wake of revival and missionary effort can be like a wild frontier. The biggest crisis facing the evangelical global church today is the fact that many pastors, missionaries and Christian leaders have no formal theological training. In fact, studies show that over 90% of all pastors in the whole world do not have a formal theological education. And according to statistics, that equates to well over 2 million evangelical pastors worldwide. In addition, with the dramatic growth in the nations of Africa every year, thousands of new churches are being established, very often without a trained pastor or preacher. Well, we're back today with Dr. Richmond Wandera. He's one of the leaders implementing a training program for pastors in African nations. He is a senior pastor from Kampala in Uganda. He's also the founder and director of Pastors Discipleship Network, a not-for-profit that equips and trains thousands of pastors across East Africa. Richmond, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thank you, Neil. It's a joy to be here.
Richmond, African nations, as I understand it, and you can confirm this, growing as many as 50,000 new converts each day. Is that sort of growth continuing?
Oh, that is continuing, and it's actually growing. I'll give you a case of my church. So last year alone, we planted a new church in a community called Buyende. It was an unreached community. And in 1 week, Neil, 1 week, we saw 1,049 souls come to Christ.
That is mind-boggling from our Australian context to even think that churches are growing at the dramatic rate that you are describing here. How has the growth of the church around the world gotten to the point where the growth has overtaken our ability to train pastors?
This growth, we talk about it at PDN this way. We say that how loud must we clap? Because with so many people coming to Christ, it forces a new question. What kind of message are they responding to? Because whatever you win people with is what you win them to. And so is that the true gospel? And farther beyond that, the pastors that are delivering this message, how can we assess the training that these pastors have heard? And so we are seeing all this movement from irreligious and African tradition and all kinds of backgrounds into the church. And what's raising to the surface now is a very, very urgent need to train pastors. And it's not the case that the pastors don't want to. It's a case of pastors who are desperate for learning, but they have no access to it.
There is a way that pastors are being certified. It's a major program that's being pushed by the Worldwide Evangelical Alliance, and your discipleship network is linked in here. It's called Reformer. We've spoken about it on this program before, but I wonder if you can give us some insight into what this program does and how it releases leaders with integrity.
Reformer is an incredible program. For the longest time, it was only accredited programs that had institutions that were looking at the accreditation, making sure that there are standards within the accreditation. And there was nothing for the non-formal training space. And majority of ministries, such as my ministry, Pastors Discipleship Network, we were doing nothing in the accredited space because we have no accreditation by government. But we were working. My ministry is serving over 15,000 pastors in the East African space, 5 nations. But we had nothing for standardization, nothing for assessment on how effective is our program. How do we know that we are actually delivering on some of these things? And so Reformer comes in to bring standardization and a form of accreditation for the non-formal training space. And that has been super helpful for us as a ministry.
And it's taken leaps and bounds since the formation of it back in 2016, and this is the first time there's ever been an internationally recognised standard for non-formal training. What's the uptake like? Are you getting people knocking down the door trying to get into this? Because, as I understand it, and you can confirm this, but successful students in this pay $5 plus postage to have this certification. So this is not a big money-making effort.
Well, I'll say this, that the church in Uganda has now come into a place where it's being looked at very carefully by government. So starting in Rwanda, and then Tanzania, and then up to Kenya, and then into Uganda, there's been a new look at the church. And for the first time, we're seeing regulation of the church. For the first time, we're seeing the government require a particular certification if people's church doors will remain open. And that's exactly where churches are beginning to run for this, because the governments have recognized the quality of reformers' work. And they've said, look, you may not have a degree from an accredited institution, but if your non-formal training meets these standards by a reformer, then your church doors can stay open. And I think that that's why we're seeing this flood of pastors running to us, because we now are in partnership with Reformer that gives these kind of certificates to them.
Last time I looked at the numbers, and it might have changed, there were 82 countries around the world, a lot of those will be African nations, who are taking up this opportunity. Any idea on the numbers? Has it grown from then?
It is grown. It's grown significantly, and partly because of the shift in the political landscape and the interaction between church and politics and church and government. And again, we're seeing this move. And remember, there is another side to it. What Reformer has done is, if you look at the standards and the guidance and help that Reformer offers these non-formal training spaces, it makes their programs richer. For the longest time, we were known as a very high-quality training institution, but our quality of delivery, our product, has taken leaps and bounds. It's just so high in quality right now, and we can attribute a lot of that to Reformer.
A lot of people love to sow good seed into evangelism. So that the evangelist arrives on the mission field and there's a harvest of souls. And as we're saying, the number of souls being saved is absolutely huge. The investment into the discipleship, though, sometimes is a little bit less, a little bit less shiny. This is the important area, though, isn't it? To invest in the development of leaders so that you can get a substantial ongoing effect of how this evangelism really takes place.
We can just look at Jesus' model. Jesus knew to raise those who were close to him. And when he was about to go, he asked one of his disciples, "Do you love me? And if you do, take care of my sheep and take care of my lamb." What he's saying there, he's basically setting structure and recognizing that the lamb's health, the sheep's health, is highly correlated to the presence of a grounded leader. And constantly through Titus and 1st and 2nd Timothy, we see this instruction to leaders. And I think that's what we're seeing, that leaders, anyone who is investing in leaders, to teach them how to disciple, how to lead, how to pastor, how to defend. It's that kind of investment that is bringing depth and sustainability to the work of the evangelism that's going on.
And it sounds like a master stroke, because we'll all know we can learn things by theory and not ever put them into practice. But when you've got a recognition of competency, is what this Reformer program works with, you know you're going to have ministers who are able to deliver in a practical way the knowledge that they've gained in their training. How valuable is that when you're on the ground in Africa?
It is absolutely valuable, and I want to just express my deep gratitude to many who have come alongside Pastors Discipleship Network to enable us bring this needed training to untrained pastors. Because once these competencies are gained by pastors, it's not the case of the pastor saying, "I know about this." No, I know how to do it. So at the end of the day, when we have pastors in that place of competency, they are grounded, they are strong, they are able to deliver and guide their congregations through an ever-changing landscape of our society. And so I am grateful beyond words just for all that people have done to enable us as Pastors Discipleship Network, bring this needed training to the untrained pastor. But then those who have come alongside Reformer to help it enrich programs like what PDN is doing, or Pastors Discipleship Network. That combination works so beautifully to bring health to the church.
And there are lots of denominations planting lots of churches, winning lots of new converts. This Reformer program, it's across denominations, and with the imprimatur, you might say, of the Worldwide Evangelical Alliance, it's very attractive because that's a high view of Scripture. Mm-hmm. It's Christocentric. It's centered on Christ, and it's about integrity for the minister.
It is. And that is part of the reason why it has become very popular. Governments want it because when the government looks at this, they're like, this is it competes with accredited training. When the church leaders and what we'd call in Uganda gatekeepers, when they look at the Reformer standards and they look at the quality, they're like, this is world class. When whoever, even the beneficiary pastors, when they look at it, they're like, man, this is what I need. And so, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Richard Wandera, he is a part of what is called the Pastors Discipleship Network. In fact, he founded the Pastors Discipleship Network, and it's using the program of Reformer, RE-Former. That's the certification that has the benchmark imprimatur of the Worldwide Evangelical Alliance. There is a website for Reformer. It's RE-Forma, FORMA.global. Now, remind me, Richmond, the PDN website for the Pastors Discipleship Network. For listeners to connect with you, to support the good work you're doing, remind us your website.
My website is pdnafrica.org. pdnafrica.org.
pdnafrica.org. And it's amazing. 50,000 new converts each day. The church is not able to keep up with the growth of the number of people coming to Christ. Pastors need to be trained, and here's one way you could support. You might want to visit that website, pdnafrica.org. And thank you so much for sharing your heart with us once again today, Dr. Richmond Wandera.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.